AskReddit. People who left someone at the altar. What made you do it? And what was the fallout? I was a guest on the bride's side. An acquaintance from a previous job that was kind enough to invite me. Everything was going well. She started walking down the aisle, then stopped halfway. Her father and mother came over. She whispered to them, then they all turned around and walked away. The groom immediately followed. Music kept playing, then slowly drifted away. We all just sat there in dead silence. A couple of minutes later, the father of the bride came back down the aisle and apologized, but there was going to be no wedding today. We all just got up and slowly left. There were a couple of angry family members on the groom's side, but once they talked to the father of the bride, they immediately just left. At the door, the mother of the bride shook my hand and thanked us for coming. Told us that they would explain everything later, but for now we should just head home. The story is that the groom the night before ceremony confessed to the bride that he was gay. He loved her. He still wanted to marry her, provide and raise children. But he needed her to know she couldn't let him live like that, and it wasn't fair to either of them. That was remarkably civil. My buddy was engaged to be married. Everything was going great up until about 2 months before the wedding, when the bride freaked out about something very minor during a family vacation and stopped speaking to him. They would text once a day so the other knew they were okay. They would say "I love you," and she would assure him she still wanted to get married. 1 month before the wedding, she called it off. They still hadn't talked except for the texts. So he called all his people and told them the wedding was off. Only he forgot about one of his friends who had been on his fiance's list, as he was a mutual friend. Mutual friend still went to the wedding, where he found a wedding. The woman had been seeing someone on the side, still went through with the wedding, but to a different guy, all on my friend's dime. He had left her in charge on cancelling everything. My wife was set to be a bridesmaid in this wedding of her college friend. It was an out-of-state wedding, and they had people coming in from all over the USA and Europe for this. Expensive sorta deal. Just my wife's dress was over $1,000 easy. 5 days before the wedding, the groom called the whole entire thing off. The reason? He was Church of Christ, and she was a Baptist, and according to him, she was in the wrong church, and since she wouldn't join his church, then he had to break it off. To the weeping bride's credit, her parents did pay back everyone, including my wife, the money for her bridesmaid dress. My mom called off a wedding to a man she was engaged to before she met my dad. It was only 1 week before. She said they got into an argument over something very trivial, something having to do with cows, but it was enough of a wake-up call for her that they were not right for each other. I know this man, and she was right not to marry him. There were people that did not get word the wedding was cancelled and showed up at the church. Edit. So I had to ask my mom what the deal with the cows was. I guess they passed by a pasture and my mom commented on how lovely the sound of cowbells are. He basically told her she was dumb for caring. / you can always tell the character of man by his opinions on cows. I was the DJ. "Please take your gifts home with you when you leave" was the weirdest announcements I've ever made. Of the 80+ I've done, it's definitely the weirdest. The ceremony walking down the aisle music just kept looping and looping until the parents walked up and announced the couple was postponing things, which was code for "damn, I really hope they work this shit out, because if they don't, that's a lot of money down the drain." They never worked it out. The bride and groom never showed their faces for the entirety of the day. Both sets of parents were crying on and off. Bridesmaids and groomsmen had changed out of their wedding attire. I was forced to make announcements like the buffet has now opened. Yes, they are serving the food and there will be no ceremonial cutting of the cake, so feel free to grab some. I was furiously texting my friends like *WHAT the hell do I play to cancel WEDDING*. I got replies like "we are never getting back together," and frankly most of T Swift's catalog. Instead, I just played jazz and Daft Punk. Seemed to fit somehow. There was a complete 6-piece Katy Perry cover band that was a surprise to the bride. They just packed up and left without playing anything. No, there wasn't a dance party. Can you imagine? In a ho, I only took half of my original payment because they were friends of mine. The best part is through a game of telephone with the maid of honor, I had to get the mother of the bride to write the check for me, and she wrote my name as Russ Brook. My name's not Russ Brook. And it's nowhere near that it starts with Ross and ends with a famous German beer that rhymes with heck. The check cashed anyways. Crazy. Not quite at the altar, but an ex-girlfriend was at a bachelorette party at a seedy male strip club. She came home from the party and said, well, the wedding is off. She said the bride was getting the usual treatment, sitting in a chair with strippers gyrating around her, whipping dongs around, and then one put whipped cream on his cock and invited her to lick it off, which she did with her tonsils until the stripper shoots his load all over the front of her I'm the bride t-shirt. About this moment, the bride kind of comes to her senses, looks around and sees like 20 of her friends pointing cell phones at her, recording and taking photos, and starts freaking out. My girlfriend says she started screaming at everyone, you better delete that shit, and generally having a full rage meltdown, which is apparently tough to take seriously when you're basted in stripages. This tale of modern romance closes very shortly later with the bride's phone ringing a call from her fiancé, who has already received photos from her friends of his bride to be with a cock stuffed in her mouth. This could almost be my former roommate. He was engaged to this woman who looked like Miss Piggy. Not even kidding. She even sounded kinda like her. He was madly in love. We were hanging out the night his fiancée was having her bachelorette party and his phone blows up. He opens the first message and laughs, but as he's reading them his face went white. He hands us his phone and we see a pic of his fiancée dancing with a male stripper. Okay, not that bad, but he swipes to the next picture and it's literally a picture of his fiancée with a dick in her face. It just got worse from there. Not quite at the altar, but a few weeks before the wedding I left my fiancé. We had been together 4 years and the proposal was really half-assed, like he was asking, because we had been together so long, and it seemed the next thing to do, not because he actually was excited about marrying me. I had been unhappy with him for a long time, but his emotional abuse had convinced me that this was the best relationship I was ever going to find, so I stayed. My mom came to visit a month before the wedding and saw how miserable I was. She said, you don't have to marry him if it won't make you happy. It was such a simple thing to say, but it was like someone finally gave me permission to consider my own feelings for the first time in years, and it changed my whole perspective. I called it off, moved out, got some agency over my own life, and am now living happily ever after. Edit. I realized I forgot to include the fallout op asked for. Lost money on deposits, managed to sell the dress for half of what I paid, left all the high ticket items I had purchased during the relationship behind, to avoid staying any longer to fight with him. I'd pay it all 10 times over to again feel the immediate relief I felt when I left our house for the last time, and I'd pay it 1,000 times over to keep the life I have now without him. As someone who was left at the altar, that sucked balls. I was dating this girl for 5 years. I popped the question and she happily agreed. 10 months in, and the day had come. Everything was fine until that question from the padre. I didn't notice at first, but someone walked as a guest to watch, and she literally changed her tone. Her demeanor instantly changed. So when the padre asked the question she said aloud no, and she walked away with someone. As it turns out, she was cheating on me with some dude for 1 year. Apparently that dude knew about our wedding and walked in to scoop her out. I was left with severe anger, not even a shred of sadness, just extremely pissed. I screamed at her family and mindstucked for the church and let me be. Soon after the sadness came in, but I got over her surprisingly quick. Took me 4 months, which was good, because I found out the dude was using her hard-earned savings for his meth addiction. Last thing I heard from her, she is living in a homeless shelter. Thank God I had no kids with that biatch. Him happily married to someone else now with kids. I just found out my mom called off her wedding pretty late in the process. This was in the 1960s and the formal wedding announcement with photos had already been posted in the newspaper, because that's a thing that people used to do. IG. She and her fiancé, who I'll call Steve, had met in college, gotten pregnant, and gave the baby up for adoption. They then continued to date for another 3 years, got engaged when my mom was 21, and called off the wedding a month before the ceremony. Turns out that giving a baby up in college is a really bonding experience and all your friends will be like, OMG, I can't believe you guys survived that together. You're such a great couple. You're such role models. etc when in actuality you're in friggin' college and are just figuring out who you are as people, and maybe that means that you're not meant to be together. She says that everyone just assumed they would get married, so they were going to, because where else did they go from? The adoption? Luckily they realized they were just going along with the motions in time. My mom says it was no hard feelings between her and Steve, that they meet up every 3 to 5 years just to see what's up with the other, and she has no regrets. Unlike her actual marriage to my father, but hey, she got me out of that deal, so it wasn't all bad. Meanwhile, I just found out / met my 54-year-old sibling for the first time that I hadn't known about. My mom's not sick, but she is getting older, and I guess she felt she needed to get this off her chest and tell me before it was too late. Turns out my secret sister is a ducking CrossFit trainer with arms like cannons, so I have no genetic excuse for not being able to do a pull-up. Also, my mom is cool as shit and I think this whole story makes her even cooler. That is an awesome story. Good that everyone turned out okay. I didn't leave her at the altar, I was the one that was left. It happened not the day of the wedding, but just a couple days before it, when literally guests from all over the country had already arrived, and the last of the $40k had been spent on everything wedding related. It was the devastatingly worst day of my life. She didn't even tell me in person. She called me and told me while I was at work that we were not getting married. I was a complete mess. Called my brother to ask him if he would notify everyone. I drove straight to my parents' house and locked myself in the guest room for a week. Never knew so much liquid could come out of someone's face for such a long period of time, lol. It's been a journey, but I'm better off for it today. It definitely still hurts, but at least there is some light in my life now. There is a bit of a backstory, but basically she deeply betrayed my trust about a year before the wedding, and from that day forward my confidence fell, and it was apparent I didn't feel like an equal in the relationship. So, she essentially didn't feel as doted upon or loved as she once was, which is true. Anyway, yay, the saying is true. When you hit rock bottom, the only way out is up. As far as I can be from the target group, but this month I was supposed to get married. Got a suit, rings, papers. I was dating this woman for 2 years. Long distance relationship. I went there several times. All was going well. She even picked this month because some astrology BS. So I went to her country for 3 months. Longest I've been. The whole time she was acting like a stranger. I felt like I was some burden to her. She was increasingly careless about me, with ever increasing demands. We didn't even got close to the altar. Actually, I was spending most of my time by myself, in a foreign country with no friends. Yet I tried to make things work. But effort needs effort from both sides, not just effort from one side, and increasing demands from the other. One of my friend's sisters. It was a few years back. It was an arranged Indian wedding, and the lady was initially very accepting and happy with the groom. They talked and fell in love with each other leading to the marriage. She was really looking forward to the wedding because she was very much involved in her wedding planning and preparation. So about 1 month before her wedding, the lady met a high school crush and started to bond with him. Then she fell in love with the high school him. Well, she eloped with the guy just hours before the wedding. Her parents disowned her. She hurt a lot of people doing that. Went to a wedding where the priest and the groom came out from sanctuary. Then the bride, dressed in regular dress clothes, and her father came out. There was mumbling, so the priest made the announcement. There would be no wedding that day, but there would be a prayer set for the couple and their family and friends. A short reception, 1 hour long at a restaurant on the same block, was held with parents of the couple welcoming the guests. Each had been too scared to cancel. Bride and groom each married others and are still with those spouses. Most civilized and best ending to a rough day.